My own sister tried to sabotage my wedding during her speech, then acted like nothing happened, and my family blamed me for not forgiving her. Growing up, I always knew there was something different about the way my parents treated my sister Elisa and me. I'm the older one, 3 years her senior, and from as early as I can remember, I was the one expected to be responsible, composed, and self-sacrificing. Meanwhile, Elisa got to be, well, Elisa. Loud, dramatic, effortlessly charming, the kind of person who could crash Dad's car and still get hugged afterward because she cried so hard about it. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't unloved, but it was like our roles had been assigned to us before we even understood them. I was the mature one, so I was expected to act like an adult even as a child. When Mom was overwhelmed, I helped with the dishes. When Dad lost his job, I picked up a part-time babysitting gig and handed over the money without being asked. I wasn't praised for it, it was just assumed that's what good daughters did. Elisa, on the other hand, was coddled. If she failed a test, the teacher must have been unfair. If she fought with a friend, the friend was probably jealous. If she got caught in a lie, which happened more times than I can count, somehow the blame always shifted. And somehow, I was often at the center of it. One time in high school, I walked in on her texting someone who wasn't her boyfriend. I didn't shame her, didn't scold her. I gently suggested she be honest with him, that maybe it was time to end things if she wasn't happy. The next day, she sobbed to our parents that I was trying to ruin her relationship because I was jealous. Jealous of what? Her drama-filled dating life. But of course, they believed her, or at least, they didn't want to deal with confronting her, so it was easier to reprimand me for getting involved in things that aren't my business. That was a pattern that repeated itself far too often. Every time she got into trouble, I became the scapegoat. Every time she felt insecure, I was the target. And every time I dared to push back, I was met with accusations of being cold, controlling, or bitter. For years, I held on to this quiet hope that things would change. That as we grew older, we'd move past the sibling rivalry, that we'd find common ground, maybe over wine nights, deep conversations, and shared experiences. I thought maybe one day we'd laugh at our childhood like sisters do in the movies. But life isn't a movie, and some people don't grow up. They just get better at hiding the knives behind their smiles. Still, I kept trying. When she wanted help applying to college, I stayed up late editing her essays. When she moved into her first apartment, I helped her furnish it using half of my own paycheck. I was always the one who gave more: time, energy, forgiveness. And every time I forgave her for something she said or did, I told myself, this is what family does. But even my patience had limits. When I got engaged to my fiancé Daniel, the love of my life, someone who respects me in ways I'd never known I needed, I was finally at a point in my life where I felt like I was stepping into the light. I had worked hard, built a career, and found someone who didn't make me feel like I had to earn love by walking on eggshells. So naturally, I wanted my sister to be part of that. Maybe foolishly, I thought this wedding would be our fresh start. I thought, maybe being my maid of honor will help us reconnect. Maybe she'll step up. She agreed immediately, squealed on the phone, and promised she'd help make it the most beautiful day of our lives. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe it. But deep down, I knew who Elisa was. I knew she didn't like being in someone else's shadow, even if that someone was her own sister. I knew she craved attention like air. I knew that her smiles often came with strings attached. And still, I gave her the stage. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't just hoping for a good wedding. I was hoping for a redemption arc that only I seemed to believe was possible. I should have listened to that quiet voice in the back of my mind, the one that whispered, "She's not going to change." Because it turns out that voice wasn't doubt. It was warning. And I ignored it. When Elisa agreed to be my maid of honor, I'll admit I was cautiously optimistic. She sounded genuinely excited, and for a few weeks I even let myself believe that maybe this would be a turning point for us. That hope didn't last long. It started with the engagement dinner, a small, cozy gathering with just family and close friends. Daniel and I wanted something low-key, warm, and special. I had been planning it for weeks and double-confirmed everything with Alyssa. The start time, the dress code, the guest list. She texted back, "Got it," with a bunch of heart emojis, like everything was perfect. Then she showed up 45 minutes late. And not just lately, loudly late. Everyone had already been seated, drinks in hand, when she burst through the door in a dramatic, flowy gown, and yes, it was white, a full-length, off-the-shoulder white dress. The room went quiet. Even my aunt gave me a look like, is she serious? She laughed it off, made some sarcastic comment about how white's just my color, and hugged everyone like nothing happened. My mom chuckled nervously. Daniel looked uncomfortable. I smiled politely, but inside I was already mentally filing this moment under warning signs. When I brought it up to her later, very calmly, mind you, she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my God, you're not that bride, are you? The one who thinks the world revolves around a dress?" I let it go. I told myself, pick your battles. That would become my mantra for the next few months. Next came the planning. I wanted her input, not control, but Alyssa treated every meeting like a personal branding opportunity. Every time I showed her something I liked, a centerpiece, a dress, a cake flavor, she'd make this face. That half-smile, half-cringe expression she's perfected over the years, like she was trying to spare me from embarrassing myself. "The venue feels basic," she said during our first walkthrough. "Kinda like a conference center, you know?" It wasn't. It was a restored 1800s estate with a blooming garden and stone archways. But to her, nothing was ever impressive unless she picked it. When I showed her my wedding dress, the one that made me tear up in the mirror, the one I had saved up for by skipping takeout and side hustling every weekend, she blinked and said, "It's nice. Kinda safe. But if you like it, that's what matters." I laughed it off at the time, but that comment haunted me. Safe. Like I was boring. Like I wasn't bold enough for something beautiful. Then came the real kicker, her behavior around Daniel. At first, it was subtle. She'd compliment his outfits, ask a few too many personal questions, make playful jabs at our relationship. "Wow, I never thought I'd see you locked down so fast," she said one night during dinner. "You used to be such a wild card in college." Daniel looked puzzled. "We barely knew each other in college," he said. I remember Alyssa just smirking and shrugging. "Oh, come on, don't play dumb. We had some great conversations back then." I laughed nervously and changed the subject, but that seed, that small, sneaky seed of doubt, had been planted. Daniel and I talked that night. He reassured me that Elisa was being weird, yes, but he had zero interest in her antics. He said, "She's clearly trying to get under your skin. I'm not playing that game." And I believed him. I still do. But that didn't make it hurt any less. And yet, I kept pushing forward. I didn't want drama to define my wedding. I kept making excuses. "She's just stressed. She doesn't mean it like that. She'll chill out eventually." But the truth is, it was never about stress or being misunderstood. It was about control, about attention. Lisa couldn't stand the idea of not being the star of the show, and I was the fool who kept handing her the mic. By the time the wedding week rolled around, I was walking on eggshells. I was exhausted from smoothing over her ego, trying to keep the peace, trying to hold on to a dream that maybe, just maybe, this would still end in a happy memory. But deep down, I knew something was brewing. I could feel it. That low, humming anxiety in my chest every time I checked my phone. Every time she said, "Trust me, I got it covered." Every time she smiled, just a little too widely. And I kept wondering, what happens when someone who always needs to be the center of attention realizes they're not the bride? I found out the answer, and it changed everything. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to this weird, nauseous calm, like the stillness before a storm. Everything looked perfect. The weather was pristine, the florist had delivered the flowers on time, my hair and makeup team were right on schedule. Even the bridesmaids were surprisingly cooperative. For once, Alyssa wasn't being overbearing. She showed up on time, smiled through photos, even helped me into my dress with minimal commentary. It felt suspiciously smooth. Daniel and I had decided not to see each other until the ceremony. So I was in this antique room upstairs at the estate, watching everything unfold from behind lace curtains, my heart thudding in my chest. I remember holding my bouquet and whispering to myself, "You made it. This is your moment. Nothing's going to ruin this." But of course, that was before I realized who I was dealing with. The ceremony itself was breathtaking. My dad cried, walking me down the aisle. Daniel looked at me like I was the only person in the universe. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, and even the officiant got misty-eyed. For that brief slice of time, it was everything I had dreamed of. Then came the reception. I had asked Elisa weeks in advance if she wanted to give a speech. She said she'd think about it. Then, a few days before the wedding, she told me she'd come up with a few words. No big deal. I didn't press her. I wanted it to be organic, heartfelt, and hopefully uneventful. About halfway through dinner, right after Daniel's best man delivered a touching and funny speech that had the whole room laughing and wiping away tears, Elisa stood up with a champagne glass in hand and walked toward the mic. I should have stopped her. I should have known. She started off light, saying how beautiful I looked, how lucky Daniel was, all the usual fluff. People smiled, clinked glasses, relaxed. Then she paused, looked directly at me and said, "I thought about telling this story in private. But then I thought, what better time than now?" My stomach dropped. Daniel's smile faltered. The entire room went quiet. She launched into this long, meandering story about a night in college, a night I barely remembered, where she claimed Daniel had flirted with her at a party before he and I started dating. She said it with a laugh, like it was a harmless anecdote. "Of course, nothing ever happened," she added, smirking, "but I figured the bride should know everything about her groom, right?" A few people laughed awkwardly, others looked uncomfortable. I could hear murmurs. Daniel's face went pale, my mom's jaw literally dropped. I was frozen. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw something, but all I could do was sit there with this fake half-smile plastered on my face, my entire body burning with embarrassment and rage. I kept thinking, she did it. She actually did it. At my wedding. Daniel stood up almost immediately, took the mic from her, and in the calmest, most collected voice I've ever heard said, "For the record, that never happened. And I think we all know why this was brought up." Elisa laughed it off, tried to play victim. "Oh my God, relax, it was a joke. You guys are so sensitive." But it was too late. The damage was done. The rest of the evening was a blur. People tried to salvage the mood. The DJ played the safe songs. The open bar worked overtime. But that lightness, that joy I had spent months building toward, it never quite came back. There was this tension in the air that clung to everything like smoke. Later, when we were alone in the bridal suite, I broke down. I cried not just because she embarrassed me or because the moment was tainted, but because I let her in. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Again. I gave her a role in the most important day of my life, and she used it to remind me, in front of everyone I love, that she'd never be happy unless she had the spotlight. Daniel held me through it, told me he loved me, told me this was just a bump and not the road, and he was right. But that night something shifted inside me. A quiet, final click. I realized I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep making excuses, couldn't keep hoping that one day Alyssa would love me without resenting me. Something had to change. And that change came faster than I expected. The day after the wedding was supposed to be a continuation of joy. Brunch with family, laughter over leftover cake, blurry selfies with friends in wrinkled tuxes and smeared mascara. But instead, I woke up with puffy eyes, a migraine, and a silence so heavy it felt like someone had draped a wet sheet over my chest. I didn't sleep much that night. Daniel stayed up with me, trying to hold the pieces together. I remember sitting on the hotel bed in my silk robe, staring at my reflection in the mirror and thinking, this is what betrayal looks like when it's blood deep. I knew Elisa's speech had changed everything. Not just between her and me, but between me and everyone in that room who heard it. Everyone who saw her attempt to unravel my wedding, thread by thread, masked as a harmless joke. What shocked me more, though, was the range of reactions that followed. That morning, my phone buzzed constantly. Texts from friends, a few saying, "She's crazy, don't even give it a second thought." Others gently asking, "Hey, you okay? Do you need to talk?" But the worst ones were from my own family. My mom's message read, "She didn't mean to ruin anything. Maybe you're just taking it too personally. She was nervous." Nervous? At what point does being nervous translate to dragging your sister's groom through the mud in front of 120 guests? My aunt called and basically said Elisa was just being Elisa. That phrase, "just being Elisa," had been weaponized against me since childhood, as if her behavior was a force of nature we all had to accept, like she was a thunderstorm and I was expected to stand in the rain, smile, and thank her for watering the flowers. Daniel, bless his heart, was done sugarcoating. He sat me down and said, "You don't have to keep her in your life. No one gets a free pass just because they share your DNA." It felt like hearing a truth I'd swallowed for years, finally said out loud. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a permanent fracture. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that the one person who was supposed to support me as my maid of honor had intentionally humiliated me on my wedding day. And that's what it was, intentional. The next few days were a blur of polite avoidance. Elisa didn't reach out. No apology, no explanation, just radio silence. She posted a few wedding selfies on Instagram, conveniently cropped to leave out the part where she tried to light a match in a room full of gasoline. The caption, "Sister's big day love always wins." The audacity. It was Daniel who finally broke the silence. He called her. I didn't ask him to, I actually begged him not to. But he wanted to hear it for himself. He told me later that she laughed when he brought up the speech. Said she was just being real, that people needed to hear the truth. When he asked why she'd wait until that moment to bring it up, whether it was even true to begin with, she brushed it off and said, "It's not like it mattered. She married you anyway." When he told me that, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, numb, because I finally accepted something I had resisted for years. My sister didn't just crave attention. She resented me. She couldn't stand the fact that I had built a life without her as the center of it. I decided then I was done. I didn't respond to her follow-up text a few days later, which simply said, "We good?" Like she was checking in after a minor disagreement over movie seats, not emotional sabotage. I didn't answer her call the week after, or the one after that. I wasn't being petty. I was protecting my peace. But that didn't go over well with the family. Suddenly, I was the problem. I was holding a grudge, breaking the family apart, making things awkward. My mom begged me to come to a Sunday dinner. "Elisa wants to apologize in person," she said. "Let's just clear the air." But why did the air only ever need clearing after I said enough? I told her no. And for the first time in years, I didn't explain myself. I didn't justify. I just said, "I'm done putting myself in the line of fire so everyone else can stay comfortable." That was the moment I knew I was changing. Not because of one wedding speech, but because of a lifetime of swallowing my feelings for the sake of family harmony. A harmony that only existed when I stayed quiet. Not anymore. It had been 3 months since the wedding. 3 months of silence between Elisa and me. 3 months of side-eyed tension at family gatherings I intentionally skipped. 3 months of texts from my mother that all danced around the same theme. Are you really going to let this go on? Yes, I was, because for once in my life I wasn't the one who caused the damage. But of course, in our family, silence is never sustainable. The pressure always builds until someone cracks, and that someone is always the one who dared to demand peace instead of pretending. It came to a head on my dad's birthday. I hadn't planned to go. I told my parents I'd take them out for dinner the next day, just the 3 of us. I thought I was being respectful, giving space, avoiding a scene. But my mom insisted. "Your dad would really love it if you were there, please, just for an hour." So I went. The backyard was filled with folding chairs, paper lanterns, and that same fake smile energy I remembered from childhood, when everyone knew something was wrong, but no one wanted to say it first. Elisa was there, of course, dressed like she was going to a summer rooftop party, drink already in hand, surrounded by a small circle of cousins who hung on her every word. She didn't acknowledge me when I walked in, just glanced in my direction and turned back to her audience like she hadn't spent the last few months demolishing my trust. I kept my distance, talked to my uncles, helped serve cake, sat beside Daniel, whose presence grounded me like an anchor against the rising tide of discomfort. It would have stayed that way if my mother hadn't cornered me in the kitchen with that pleading look. "She's going to apologize tonight," she said quietly. "Just give her 5 minutes, please." I took a deep breath. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired. Tired of being the villain in a story I didn't write. So I agreed. A few minutes later, Elisa found me by the side of the house, near the garden where we used to play as kids. She had that same champagne flute in her hand and a look on her face that screamed, "Let's get this over with." "Hey," she said casually. "So, I guess we need to talk." I said nothing, just waited. She sighed, like I was already making things difficult. "Look, I didn't mean to ruin your wedding. It wasn't personal. I don't know. I got caught up. It was supposed to be funny." Still, I said nothing. Because what was I supposed to say? Thank you for humiliating me in front of our entire family and friends, but as long as it wasn't personal, we're good? She looked frustrated. "God, are you seriously going to just stand there and act like I'm some monster?" And that was it, the moment. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, Alyssa, you're not a monster. You're just selfish and petty. And you've spent our entire lives needing to be the center of everything, even my wedding." Her mouth opened, but I kept going. "It gave you every chance. I let you in. I forgave things most people wouldn't have blinked at. But this wasn't a joke. This was calculated, and I'm done making room in my life for people who don't respect me." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. "Wow," she finally said. "You've really changed." And I nodded. "Yes, I have, and it's the best thing I've ever done." I walked away. That moment didn't fix everything. There was no big hug, no swelling music, no Hallmark-style reconciliation, but there was something far better. Clarity. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come in the form I needed. I stopped pretending blood was a free pass to disrespect. I stopped accepting crumbs and calling it connection. After that day, I put space where there had only ever been obligation. I didn't attend every family event. I stopped replying to guilt-laced group texts. I created boundaries, and, for the first time, I enforced them. My relationship with my parents shifted, not out of spite, but from necessity. They didn't understand it at first. My mom called less. My dad asked if I could just let it go. But over time, they saw that I was happier, lighter. Daniel and I built a new life with intention, one where peace wasn't negotiated away to keep others comfortable. And Elisa, she stayed, Elisa, still at the center of every room, still posting carefully curated snapshots of a life built on sparkle and drama, but not in mine. And I've never felt more free. Thank you for listening my story with patience.